want to look up on the board, the color is going to be a reference to something we have to share with the group. And I think, is it wild? The yellow one is wild, so if you get a yellow one, you can choose whichever one you want.
I'm going to read it out. The red says, tell us what you did over the break. White is what appeals to you about Guatemala. Green is teach us some Spanish phrases. And blue is tell us a travel highlight from your own experience. And then yellow is a wild card.
I haven't traveled that much, so I don't have very many highlights, but when I was younger I used to cross-country ski race, and we'd travel all over just to race. And so one year I went to Quebec, and one of the races was on the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City. And so yeah, I had to race on the Plains of Abraham. And
In what month?
I remember there wasn't very much snow, but I don't remember which month it was.
It was probably still one of the coldest places in Canada, right?
Yeah, it was cold,
Yeah.
very cold. But the snow is, actually I don't even know if it was that cold. There wasn't very much snow,
Okay.
but it was probably cold.
Because I lived there for 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah, I was studying, and I really felt on the Plains of Abraham, especially because the wind comes up from the river.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt that was, for sure for me, was the coldest place I'd ever been in my life.
With the break, and we had 2 weeks of North Caribbean coast and Monteverde, there's the sort of forest, cloud forest, and then also the rainforest in the Pacific. They call Manuel Antonio. In Costa Rica, you probably know all these tourist areas. So yeah, kind of they're really a westernized country. Tourism is generate most of the country's economy.
Yeah.
So that's why I love fun. And the water is very nice and warm.
I was in Costa Rica in 2006, actually, and this was after I was doing a study abroad semester in Mexico. We wanted to, I guess, have a little break from it. But during the time that we were there in Costa Rica, the funniest thing happened was it was a year when there were elections. So we would walk into like a store, and they would sell liquor in the store, but they would have these black tarps over with padlocks, so you couldn't purchase alcohol. You couldn't purchase alcohol in restaurants either. And it was so people would be sober enough to go and vote on the day of election. Yeah, very, very neat. But the tourism, when we got there, I think the biggest shocker to me was one of the big beaches. There was like a Domino's and a Subway, which I didn't want to see.
From a previous break, I went to study abroad, and really fortunate to be able to stay in Austria for 4 months, and it was really great. And after that, traveled 2 months in Europe. We were in about 8 hours of train ride, or slept overnight on the train. And when we got off the road, we were so tired, just want to get the place like all hostels, and then we're like, okay, we rest a bit, and then we left the place and then walked to the Colosseum. And it was there's like they have a riot or something. So, and I heard about it, but I never really experienced it. So the Colosseum was right there, and we're walking that direction, and then the whole group is just like coming towards us. So it was just like, oh my god, go away. And then it's pretty much like the entire 15 minutes walk, and just people just keep coming to us, and it was just like, wow, man, actually Italians are quite passionate in their protest. So yeah, that was one of the highlights.
Wow.
Yeah.
And mine would probably be from summer 2012, where I spent the month of July in Florence, Italy, studying art history. So that was probably a highlight, a travel highlight, and probably a highlight of my life. Being able to A, study abroad in Italy, and B, for art history is something pretty special. So that's definitely a highlight for me.
What was your favorite piece?
Oh, that's so hard.
Can't just ask that question.
Yeah, please.
I just did.
Well, I think it would probably be, I thought what a painting was in a different either gallery. It was just in a little monastery. I wasn't expecting to see this one. It's a version of the Annunciation. And I walk up this set of stairs, and right at the top of the stairs, like the painting's about the size of one of those whiteboards. It's a very big painting, and it was right there, and that's the original, and it totally caught me off guard that I was actually seeing it, and I had to make sure I didn't fall down the stairs, and it was pretty incredible, so.
One of my favorite memories from being in Ghana in West Africa. My family jokes that I just want to go to all the countries and start with a G now. And my favorite thing was towards the end of my stay there, I was there for 3 months, we'd been working on this coloring book about malaria prevention for kids, so they didn't have any words, they could just pass it around colored. And the day finally came where we got to pass it out, and it was kind of like my baby project because nobody had been working on it, and then I just got together one night and drew all the pictures up. Cutting the door on mosquitoes was a really interesting one because you have to draw them really small, so we decided to draw them just freakishly big. So it's like, shut the door, the human-sized mosquito is going to come in. And so we finally distributed it, and my friends who are Ghanaian, we went into this movie theater, and they're like, it's great, there'll be lots of kids in here. We just need to wait for a break, and they're going to let us, they're going to turn off the movie and let us talk and distribute the coloring books. And I thought that's cool. So we sat down and we watched the cheesiest action flick I've ever seen with the worst special effects ever, and it was incredibly violent. And then when the lights came on in the theater, there were all these 5, 6-year-old kids.
Oh my goodness.
But the thing is that the action was just so fake that I wasn't even concerned about it. And then of course we're talking about this coloring book, and all of them just ditched the movie and took the coloring book off.
Wow.
Yeah, and this was seriously nice quality action for some movies there, so I was really impressed with that.
Yeah.
Favorite memory of mine. I took a coloring book back with me actually.
I went to Egypt when I was in grade 10, so 5 or 6 years ago, and we got to ride camels through the pyramids, and then we got to go and walk on the pyramids, and it was just such a different experience from what I'm used to here. And we went to a whole pile of ancient temples, and we took a cruise down the Nile, which is pretty nice.
What was riding a camel?
Terrifying. It was very painful, and then when the camel went and to get off, I kind of fell off, and the guy had to catch me. It was an interesting trip, yeah.
My highlight was actually through a lot of the interactions that I've had with students in China. And we went to a university in Huizhou, and we did a lot of English corners with Huizhou. English corners with subject matters that were kind of even a little taboo to even talk about here, but these students who their second language is English would basically facilitate a whole entire English corner on topics like, when we went there, it was sexuality, women's rights, people who crushes. It was really neat to see that they were able to speak about it and really express their opinion about it. And it was such a highlight for me because to see every student there really wanting to listen and really wanting to learn, and our students really engaging, and them sharing their different perspectives and really understanding that their perspectives were really different, but they could all really still discuss it. That was definitely a really big highlight. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that you guys will get to do is do an English corner with students in Guatemala.
What do you mean by English corner?
I guess it's an exchange, right? Where Chinese students students could practice their English with people who speak English as a first language.
In Guatemala, you can have your children attend the bilingual school, and their entire education is in English and Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So they are very bilingual.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that will be chosen to meet with us when we're there and spend time with us would be chosen by the teachers because they are the students who are really the most fluent of all the students. Most of them will be students in grade 10, 11, and 12. Yeah, and so for them, even though they speak English really well, to be able to meet you and speak with you when you're from an English-speaking country, you're a native speaker of English, that's a huge highlight for them. It's the one about Walt Disney and about Mary Poppins, called Saving Mr. Banks.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I'm sure, has anybody seen it?
I saw the trailer and I was like,
You won't, but none of the advertising for it gives you an idea of what it is, and it will surprise you. It's a very, very good film. Walt Disney and the author of Mary Poppins are of the same generation, and it's that generation. It would be people who are about the same age as my father. My father is 88, who lived through the Depression and lived through some very, very tough times as children. And Walt Disney lived in the United States. The author of Mary Poppins lived in Australia when she was a youth. And it's about how do people like that, who are creative, like Walt Disney and the author of Mary Poppins, how do they draw on that experience in their creativity? In both cases, they became incredibly well-known, famous people because of their creativity. Basically, that difference in them, in their personalities and how they dealt with their childhood and their youth is what gets in the way of them being able to agree on the film, but it's really neat to see how they resolve it. There's 4 to pass that way. We have a really good gender balance right now.
Whoa, this feels like grade 7 here.
Yeah. Why? Because of the small class?
Guys,
Oh,
girls.
right. Okay. Okay, so this technically is not a course outline. Because my division chair has to approve it before I can reproduce it. So, which he'll do tomorrow because he wasn't here today.
You have a Moodle site that we can.
I'm not gonna use a Moodle site, no, but we have a Facebook site.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna use it for anything and everything you want. The author is Victor Montejo, and what it is it's kind of a memoir. So he was part of a large community that was victimized by the army during the Civil War, and he's one of the few people that survived. And he was actually a teacher in that community. And he became a refugee, and he lived in Guatemala, in Mexico on the border with Guatemala, under the protection of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And he wrote this memoir about what happened in his village and how he managed to be one of the few people that survived. So that's the mandatory reading. In Latin America, the patterns of development, urbanization are very, very similar. So it's often a country will end up being an example of a pattern that is happening everywhere in Latin America. For example, believe it or not, Latin American societies are some of the most urbanized societies in the world. So that is kind of ironic. I think a lot of people have a picture in their mind of Latin America that is the opposite of that. But those kinds of facts are in that book. You're going to do a research essay, which you'll hand in April. And in addition to that, you're going to present about that essay in March. So your presentation will be about the research you did, but it's not the same as being finished your essay. You're kind of taking some information from the research you've done and you're putting it together in a presentation to engage our class and let them know what you were researching. And the thing that's due before we go is the annotated bibliography. Okay, so if you turn over, I've described the research essay here. So the length of the essay would be 2,000 to 3,000 words. And it's important that you demonstrate that you have found and read material that you have located using your research skills. You might want to look at climate change and the impact it's having on Guatemala. There's a lot of instability in Guatemala because of climate change. Roads get washed out, major highway systems get washed out. An issue like technology, like using your texting all the time. I imagine that when we have our exchange in Guatemala with the students who attend the school on the Del Monte plantation, you probably noticed that I'm just gonna predict they all have cell phones and they all text like you do. That might be something you wanna reflect upon, because that's one dimension of globalization. That's a kind of a homogenization of our cultures, right? Or something that links people of a certain age group, maybe, because we'll have to find out how Peter and I text and see if it's the same as you. The research on mining doesn't seem to feel there is a balanced point of view. It's a very hot topic, and you're either in favor of it or you're against it. And both sides debate each other and often question each other's facts about the repercussions of mining. I've been told that it's called traje, the outfits that Guatemalans wear, especially the women, were actually like uniforms, even though they're gorgeous and colorful, were like uniforms that identified them with the landowner, and they were basically indentured to that, almost like slaves. So that was, if they strayed too far away from their community, the colorful skirt that they wore was a marker that identified them as being part of that plantation, which is owned by that man. But that culture might have been imposed upon them by Spanish landowners who came from Europe and imposed that on them. It maybe actually did not necessarily originate completely from their own mining traditions. You know, that's a topic you can find. You can find an interesting history of it just by focusing on something as narrow as weaving in Guatemala. Okay, obviously I could talk for hours and hours about topics. So the theme of your essay, the topic of your essay, I mean, ideally it's something that you really genuinely feel very, very interested in, and you didn't need me to give you an essay assignment to get you started thinking about it. Okay, and then the critical reflection journal. I'm going to give you more information about this next week. But basically, we want you to kind of connect the dots. So when you're in Guatemala, we want you to think about the different experiences you have there and to try to relate it to some of the discussions we've had in class. An artist who was in the Ideas program who did it as he had his book with blank pages in it that he drew on every day. And then he wrote about each drawing, and that's what he gave me to evaluate. Okay, so, and I guess, of course, if you wanted to make a film or something like that, I wouldn't be opposed to that, right? So I'm very flexible about that. So the quickest way to jeopardize your experience is to be indiscriminate about what you eat, right? And like buy things off vendors in the street and stuff like that.
Well, one of my favorite things about traveling is buying things off of vendors in the street. So I mean, there's definitely a certain level between being indiscriminate and being explorative, which I mean, I'm definitely one to push towards the explorative side, where if I see something on the side of the street that smells good, I'll try it. I'm in a foreign country. But is it really like that?
Well, I guess what you have to do is weigh the pros and cons. If you then, when we go to Tikal, are sick and can't actually visit Tikal, was it worth it?
I mean, but that's.
Just eat it last.
Yeah.
And then have a terrible
I'm
food
going
home.
to eat street food one day. Just bring that up.
Yeah, I don't think Guatemala has all the street food anyways to
Okay,
offer,
well
so,
then maybe I won't.
yeah, so you may
I'll eat
be
with the
specifically
locals.
where, yeah.
The restaurants are local, like Guatemala's not a place where you find lots and lots of American food chains
No,
and
I'm
things
not
like
looking
that.
for Americans. I'm just kind of like, one of my favorite things about when I'm in a foreign country or like someplace I have no ideas is I try to look up where like people are lining up or where it's busy and like where people are actually going. And, I mean, even if it's like a taco cart on the side of the street in Mexico, like that's how I've found some of the best food in the world.
I think there's a lot of those, like, those types of like, carts and things like that in Guatemala, but there's definitely like restaurants that you know where, you know, the women have been working in the kitchen for 20 plus years, and they probably make the best tortillas that you've ever had in your life, and it's a safe and clean environment to eat it. So we would, you know, recommend those.
I mean, and it depends what you're talking about, because, raw vegetables would be the most risky thing. So if you bought salad on the street, I mean, you're asking for it. If you get sick, you know, I'd rather you say, gee, those tamales looked great that they were selling in the market, Laurel. Will you teach me how to make them when we get home? And I will.
And she will.
I will.
She will.
Yeah, I know how to cook the food from Central America. But I mean, we could tell you stories of people who got sick in the last 2 field schools and how they regretted it because they spent a whole day in bed in a hotel and missed an entire day's activities. So for example, the issue of safety and security, we will have a class where we will spend quite a lot of time on that, and we'll put you in small groups and give you scenarios and ask you to problem solve and report to the whole group about how you would handle those scenarios. And yeah, so we'll be spending one class where we focus on that.
Are there guerrilla police forces in Guatemala?
Guerrilla police force, that's an oxymoron.
But in Honduras, at least a couple of years ago, there was 5 or 6 police forces, and the non-guerrilla one was one of the least powerful ones.
No, I mean, I don't know why you're using the term guerrilla, but the Civil War ended in 1996, and the peace accords were brokered by the United Nations. There is not a guerrilla war going on in Guatemala.
Well, by guerrilla, I
There
just mean,
is
like,
organized crime.
additional, like,
Extrajudicial.
yeah, okay.
There may be. They wouldn't be after you. Yeah. There's organized crime in Guatemala, yes. It's mainly to do with transporting drugs from one end of the country to the other, because Guatemala is part of the corridor that delivers drugs to North America, illicit drugs to North America.
And the only time that you will see armed forces, I guess, or armed people, would be when you're in Guatemala City. And the reason why they're there is, you guys are staying in Zone 10, which is the most affluent area in the city, and they are there to actually protect you guys, the other affluent community. So
Yeah.
they're not there to intimidate tourists or any of that.
Yeah, Guatemala's gone through a peace process, so their police force has been trained actually by Canada, by the RCMP in Canada, and they have community police as well, and they've all been trained in the context of a post-Civil War peaceful society. So.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure about Guatemala. I've heard a couple horror stories about Honduras and some other places.
Well, there's lots of horror stories to tell about Guatemala, but not to do with police. Yeah, I mean, we'll tell you that we're not gonna let you go off on your own at any time. You always have to have a partner, yeah. But police are not something you need to worry about in Guatemala.
For Guatemala, there were actually no mandatory vaccinations. They only have ones that were highly recommended, okay? So Hep A, typhoid, Hep B, and influenza. So most people usually have received Hep B in school. If you haven't, then you can take a look at if you still have your immunization booklet to check. And then Hep A and typhoid, it's usually people who've traveled before usually have that already. If you haven't, there's actually vaccinations that are combos of both. So Twinrix is a combo of Hep A and Hep B, and then Vivaxim is a combo of Hep A and typhoid. Okay. If you want or need any of these vaccines, can you just let me know as soon as possible? Because what's really great about our health services here is that, does everyone know that we have health services here on campus? Amazing. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so what they'll actually do is they'll order in the vaccinations and charge you at cost for them, instead of going to a travel clinic, which is actually quite expensive. Yeah, it's really expensive. So they'll actually do it at cost, and the nurses get here to administer it right away. So if you, do some research and see what you need, and then just let me know, and then we can order it, because it's better if we know how much we need as a group and then instead of doing it piecemeal. Influenza, so I know there's a big outbreak right now, and we would just like to warn you all because we just don't want you to get sick before we go.
If you normally get a flu shot and you haven't had one yet, it's not too late to get one. And if you get sick between now and when we leave, it's going to affect your immune system, and it's going to affect you in Guatemala. You won't have as strong an immune system, so you really should. It's standard here, so any doctor knows what you have had, and if you really want to know, there's a public health nurse who's assigned to the region where you went to high school, and you can just phone.
Yeah.
She keeps track, she has a file on you.
There's 3 different types of travel insurance. There's one that is like emergency medical. Okay, that's the one that I need from you. There's, you know, like trip cancellation, baggage loss. Those I don't need from you. And those usually they sell in a package. Anyways, but I definitely need one that's travel health. So these are the things that cover you for emergency hospital, emergency dental, prescription. If something really bad happens, that they will actually send someone from home to come to your bedside, ambulance, helicopter, whatever. And I need it to actually be covered from February 7th until the 17th. So once you purchase something like that, they'll spit you out something through email that basically says, yes, your name is covered for these dates or these things in point form. And then so I will just need that piece of paper so you can email that to me after. Just let you know that we also have a copy of your passport, and we will keep one on us while we're there. And the person who's an emergency contact is going to keep a copy of it here as well. But you should have a copy of your own passport always. One of the tricks that I actually use is I keep a colored, scanned copy of my passport on my iPhone on my Dropbox, so I can access it all the time. And it's under my favorites, so I don't need to actually be connected onto Wi-Fi to look at it. And it's super helpful because then I keep my passport in a safe place, so even when you're writing immigration documents, I just pull my phone and look at it instead of pulling out my passport. We will be at the check-in desk. So we're in the international departures at the American Airlines desk, and we will be there. So make sure that you see either Laurel or Sean before you go in to check in to get your boarding pass. And then you can just go in and hang out and have breakfast or whatever while you're in there. We can't check in online before, like most people do, because we're doing it as a big group, so it gets really messy, because sometimes if you end up checking in for yourself and you don't check in for someone else, and anyways, it just gets confusing. So the earlier you get there, the better, especially for maybe the taller gentleman who might want to request emergency exit or somewhere in the aisle. If this is for people who are really last minute and really desperate, you can always get it at the airport. But the airport gives you one of the worst rates ever, so I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're kind of last minute, then you're last minute.
You say that U.S. dollars is like its currency. Is it just a better idea in general, just get quits all it is?
I would do a little bit of both, actually.
We think that it's gonna cost us approximately $30 a day, because usually breakfast is included in your hotel, and usually you have to get your own lunch and dinner. There are some exceptions to that in our plans, and we'll tell you about that. But you know, you also can change dollars into quetzales at a bank in Guatemala, but banks in Guatemala are always very busy and have long lineups, so it can often use up more of your time than you thought. Yeah, so sometimes people get frustrated because they expect it's gonna take them 15 minutes. It ends up taking them an hour and 15 minutes.
And because most places will take US, so even if you run out, they have quetzales, but it's good to have a local currency. If you, for some reason, run out of all your cash, you can also use, some places will take your credit card while you're there, and you can also use your debit card at the ATM machines while you're in Guatemala. But just you have to remember that with debit cards, there's always an like they'll charge you once to use it, and they'll charge, your bank itself will charge you again for the international withdrawal, so it gets a little bit expensive. And with your Visa, it doesn't charge you, like, it gives you the rate that the bank gives you, which usually is not a good rate either, but it doesn't charge you a service fee for it. Adapters. So luckily Guatemala has the same adapters as North America. So if you need to charge your phone or charge anything else, we don't think that, it's not required of you to bring a laptop, right? So, I mean, if you wanted, like, if you had a tablet or something that you wanted just to bring for entertainment, like, go right ahead. But you don't need to bring a laptop with you. When you're writing up your blogs, Laurel or Sean will have their computer with them.
It's like, it's an SLRs and I'm bringing extra buttons and stuff, so.
Yeah.
With that, plus whatever else I was bringing with that, plus clothes, 2 pairs of shoes maybe, like.
Yeah.
so
It's
really-
doable because Mustali packed a whole set of camera gear, like tripod, lens, audio equipment, like all of that. Yeah.
And we can share, we're willing to share out some of that responsibility, so if you're bringing a camera like that, and we can kind of share around some of the other things.
Yeah.
Now only one shirt.
I want you to wear a shirt while you're getting it cleaned though, so.
That's what the wife is for.